The dust from the stagecoach still hung in the air when Georgia Harper stepped down onto the wooden sidewalk of Amarillo, Texas, her hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped her worn carpet bag. She had $37 sewn into the lining of her dress, a letter of introduction to the widow Morrison, who supposedly needed help at her boarding house, and a heart so shattered she wondered if it would ever beat properly again. The September heat of 1882 pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket, but it was nothing compared to the weight of shame she carried from St. Louis, where everyone had watched her fiancé publicly humiliate her at their engagement party, announcing he was marrying her cousin instead, because Georgia was too plain, too simple, too ordinary for a man of his rising station. She smoothed her gray traveling dress with shaking fingers and looked down the main street of this frontier town. False-fronted buildings lined both sides of the dusty road, and she could hear piano music drifting from one of the saloons, even though it was barely noon. Cowboys on horseback moved lazily through the heat, their spurs jingling with each step their horses took. This was as far from St. Louis society as she could get, which was exactly what she needed. The boarding house was easy enough to find with the directions the station master had given her. It was a 2-story structure with a fresh coat of white paint and green shutters that looked cheerful despite the harsh Texas sun beating down on everything. Georgia climbed the 3 steps to the front porch and knocked, trying to steady her breathing. She had to make this work. She had nowhere else to go. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "You must be Miss Harper. Come in out of this heat. I got your telegram yesterday." "Thank you, Mrs. Morrison." Georgia stepped into the relative coolness of the front hall, grateful for the slight breeze coming through the open windows. "I appreciate you considering me for the position. Well, let me be honest with you, dear. I need help desperately. My arthritis has been getting worse, and I cannot keep up with all the cooking and cleaning for my boarders like I used to." Mrs. Morrison led her through to a tidy kitchen that smelled of fresh bread and coffee. "I have 6 regular boarders, all decent men who work honest jobs. I provide breakfast and supper, and I keep their rooms clean and their laundry done. In exchange for helping me with all that, you will get your own room, all your meals, and $15 a month. Does that sound fair?" $15 was more than Georgia had hoped for, especially with room and board included. "That sounds very fair, Mrs. Morrison. When would you like me to start?" "How about right now? You can settle into your room and then help me with supper preparations. The men start coming in around 6, and they are always hungry." The older woman's smile was warm and genuine. "I think you and I are going to get along just fine, Miss Harper." George's room was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a pretty quilt, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and a window that looked out over the side yard, where a few scraggly trees provided some shade. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 other dresses in the small wardrobe, and placing her mother's silver-backed brush on the washstand. Her mother had died when Georgia was 16, and her father had followed 2 years later, leaving her to live with her aunt and uncle in St. Louis. That had been 4 years ago, and she had thought herself fortunate when Robert Chandler had started courting her. She pushed the thoughts away and splashed water on her face from the basin, then tidied her dark brown hair and went back downstairs to help with supper. Mrs. Morrison put her to work immediately, showing her where everything was kept, as they prepared a meal of roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and biscuits. Georgia found the work soothing, losing herself in the familiar rhythms of cooking. Her aunt had made sure she knew all the domestic skills a proper young lady should possess, though those skills had apparently not been enough to keep Robert interested. At 6 o'clock, the boarders began arriving. Mrs. Morrison introduced them one by one as they came into the dining room. There was Mr. Peterson, who ran the general store, Mr. Walsh, who worked at the bank, 2 brothers named Callahan, who worked at the livery, and Mr. Chen, who did laundry and mending for half the town. They were all polite, nodding respectfully to Georgia as they took their seats at the long table. "We are still waiting on Mr. Brennan," Mrs. Morrison said, glancing at the empty chair at the end of the table. "He is usually very punctual." Just then the front door opened and boots sounded in the hallway. Georgia was bringing a platter of chicken to the table when he walked in, and she nearly dropped it. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his dusty work shirt, and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar beneath his hat. His face was tan from long hours in the sun, with strong features and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a striking blue-gray that seemed to see right through her when they met hers across the room. He removed his hat, revealing more of that dark hair, and nodded politely. "Sorry I am late, Mrs. Morrison. Had some trouble with a calf at the Rockingham Ranch?" "No trouble at all, Jackson. This is Miss Harper. She's going to be helping me around here. Miss Harper, this is Jackson Brennan. He is a ranch hand at the Rockingham, about 5 miles west of town." "Pleased to meet you, Miss Harper." His voice was deep and warm, and when he smiled, Georgia felt something flutter in her chest that she thought had died back in St. Louis. She managed a small nod, not trusting her voice, and hurried back to the kitchen for the rest of the food. Her hands were shaking again, but for an entirely different reason this time. She scolded herself silently. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for another man, especially when she had learned so painfully that she was not the kind of woman men wanted. Supper passed with comfortable conversation among the boarders. Georgia served the food and tried to be invisible, but she found herself acutely aware of Jackson Brennan at the end of the table. He had an easy manner with the other men, joking and laughing, but she noticed he was also respectful and soft-spoken, with none of the rough edges some cowboys seem to cultivate. When he complimented the meal, his eyes found hers, and he smiled, and Georgia felt her cheeks flush as she quickly looked away. After supper, she helped Mrs. Morrison clean up, while the boarders retired to the front parlor or their rooms. The older woman chatted pleasantly about life in Amarillo, explaining that the town had grown considerably in recent years with the railroad coming through. "It used to be just a handful of buildings when I first came here with my late husband in 1870, she said, handing Georgia a plate to dry. "Now we have got proper stores, a school, even a church. It is becoming quite civilized." "How long has Mr. Brennan been boarding here?" The question was out before Georgia could stop herself, and she felt her cheeks warm again. "Mrs.?" Morrison gave her a knowing look, but did not comment on it. "About 8 months now. He is a good man, Jackson is. Works hard, saves his money, treats everyone with respect. He has got dreams of buying his own ranch someday. His father had a small spread up in Kansas, but it was lost when Jackson was young. I think he has been working toward getting it back ever since." That night, Georgia lay in her narrow bed and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the Texas night through her open window. Crickets chirped, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked. The air was still warm despite the late hour, and she thought about the man with the blue-gray eyes who wanted to build something of his own. She understood that desire, the need to create something that could not be taken away. She had thought marriage would give her that security, a place to belong, but she had been wrong. "I am not enough," she whispered into the darkness, remembering Robert's cruel words at that engagement party. How he had listed all her failings in front of everyone she knew. Too quiet, too plain, too boring. Not enough education, not enough wit, not enough beauty. The words had carved themselves into her heart, and she did not know how to remove them. She finally fell into an uneasy sleep, telling herself that Amarillo was just a place to hide and heal, nothing more. She would not make the mistake of hoping for anything more again. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable routine. Georgia rose early to help Mrs. Morrison prepare breakfast for the boarders, then spent her days cooking, cleaning, and doing laundry. The work was hard but satisfying, and she found herself enjoying the older woman's company. Mrs. Morrison had a gentle way about her, and seemed to understand without being told that Georgia was nursing a wounded heart. Jackson Brennan left early each morning for the ranch, and returned each evening covered in dust and smelling of horses and hay. He was always polite to Georgia, thanking her for the meals and sometimes commenting on the weather or asking about her day. She kept her responses brief, not wanting to encourage anything that might lead to more heartbreak, but she could not help noticing things about him. The way he always held the door for Mrs. Morrison when her hands were full. How he helped Mr. Chen carry a heavy bundle of laundry one evening without being asked. The careful way he mended a broken chair in the dining room on his day off, refusing any payment from Mrs. Morrison. One evening in early October, Georgia was in the kitchen washing dishes after supper when Jackson appeared in the doorway with his plate and cup. "Thought I would save you a trip," he said, setting them on the counter beside the basin. "Thank you, Mr. Brennan. That is kind of you." She kept her eyes on the soapy water, scrubbing at a stubborn spot on a plate. He did not leave immediately, and she could feel him watching her. "You have been here almost a month now. How are you finding Amarillo?" "It is very different from St. Louis, but I like it well enough." She rinsed the plate and set it in the drying rack, St. Louis, that is a big city. Must be quite an adjustment, coming to a little frontier town like this. Georgia shrugged, reaching for another plate. Sometimes a change is what a person needs. There was a pause, and then he said gently, Mrs. Morrison mentioned you had a difficult time before you came here. I do not mean to pry, but if you ever need someone to talk to, I am a good listener. The kindness in his voice made her throat tighten. She blinked back the sudden sting of tears and forced herself to meet his eyes. That is very kind, Mr. Brennan, but I am fine. I just needed a fresh start, that is all. He studied her for a long moment, those blue-gray eyes seeing more than she wanted them to see. Then he nodded slowly. Well, the offer stands if you change your mind. Good night, Miss Harper. Good night, Mr. Brennan. After he left, Georgia gripped the edge of the basin and took several deep breaths. She could not let herself be drawn to him, no matter how kind he was. She had learned her lesson about her own worth. Men like Jackson Brennan, good men with dreams and ambitions, did not want women like her. Robert had made that abundantly clear. The following Sunday, Mrs. Morrison insisted Georgia take the afternoon off. You have been working yourself to the bone, child. Go for a walk, see the town, get some fresh air. The dishes will still be here when you get back. Georgia reluctantly agreed and changed into her better dress, a deep blue calico that had been her mother's. She pinned on her straw hat and set out to explore Amarillo in the bright October sunshine. The heat had finally broken, and the air had a pleasant crispness to it that reminded her of autumn in Missouri before she had moved to St. Louis. She walked down Main Street, looking in the windows of the various shops. The general store had a display of canned goods and farming implements. The dressmaker had a beautiful emerald green dress on a mannequin that Georgia admired but could never afford. She paused outside the bookshop, tempted by the volumes displayed in the window, but decided to save her money for necessities. Lost in thought, she did not notice the group of cowboys riding down the street until one of them called out, Well, hello there, darling. New in town, are you? Georgia quickened her pace, keeping her eyes down, but she heard the horses stop, and boots hit the ground behind her. Hey, I am talking to you. It is rude not to answer when a man speaks to you. Her heart began to pound. She was on a public street in broad daylight, but there was no one else nearby at the moment. She turned to face three young men in dusty trail clothes, all of them grinning at her in a way that made her skin crawl. I beg your pardon, but I need to be going. She tried to step around them, but one of them moved to block her path. What is the hurry? We just want to be friendly. Maybe buy you a drink or something. No, thank you. Please let me pass. Her voice came out smaller than she intended, fear making her throat tight. The tallest one reached out to touch her arm, and Georgia jerked back. Come on now, do not be like that. We do not bite. Much. The lady asked you to let her pass. The voice came from behind her, deep and hard as iron. I suggest you do it. Georgia spun around to see Jackson standing there, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. He was not pointing it at anyone, but the threat was clear in his stance and the cold look in his eyes. The three cowboys exchanged glances, and the tall one held up his hands. We did not mean any harm, just having a little fun. Find your fun somewhere else. Jackson's voice had not risen, but there was steel in it. Now, they muttered among themselves, but mounted their horses and rode off down the street. Jackson watched them go, not moving until they had turned the corner. Then he looked at Georgia, and his expression softened immediately. Are you all right, Miss Harper? She nodded, though her hands were shaking. Yes, thank you. I am fine. They just startled me. Those boys from the Circle T Ranch. They come into town on Sundays and drink too much and cause trouble. Most of them are harmless, but you should not be walking alone. Let me escort you back to Mrs. Morrison's. That is not necessary. I am sure I will be fine. I am sure you would be too, but I would feel better seeing you safely home. Please. He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Georgia took it. They walked in silence for a few minutes, and Georgia was acutely aware of the strength in his arm beneath her hand. The way his presence made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in a long time. Finally, she said quietly, Thank you for intervening, Mr. Brennan. That was very kind of you. Jackson, please, and it was nothing. No man worth his salt would stand by and watch a lady be harassed. He glanced down at her, a slight smile on his lips. Though, I have to say, you looked like you were ready to fight them off yourself. Despite herself, Georgia smiled. I was considering it. I have a hat pin, and I was thinking about where I might stick it to cause the most damage. He laughed, a rich sound that made something warm bloom in her chest. Remind me never to get on your bad side, Miss Harper. Georgia, she said impulsively. If I am to call you Jackson, you should call me Georgia. Georgia? He said her name like he was tasting it, and she liked the way it sounded in his deep voice. That is a pretty name. Were you born there? No, my mother just liked the name. She said it sounded graceful, though I have never felt particularly graceful myself. The words came out before she could stop them, tinged with the bitterness she tried so hard to hide. Jackson stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. Why would you say that about yourself? Georgia felt her face flush. She had said too much. It is nothing, just something someone once told me. We should get back. But he did not move. Someone told you that you were not graceful? Let me guess, the same someone who caused you to leave St. Louis. She looked away, unable to meet his eyes. It does not matter now. I am here, and he is there, and that is the end of it. Georgia. He said her name gently, and when she still would not look at him, he touched her chin with his fingers, guiding her face back toward his. The touch was feather-light, respectful, but it sent a shiver through her. Whatever that fool told you, whatever he said or did to hurt you, he was wrong. Do you hear me? He was wrong. Tears pricked her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. You do not know what he said. I do not need to know the specifics to know he was wrong. I have seen you these past weeks, the way you work so hard to help Mrs. Morrison, the way you are kind to everyone, even Mr. Peterson when he complains about everything, the way you smile at Mrs. Morrison's stories, even though I know you have heard them all twice before. A man would have to be blind and stupid not to see what you are worth. The tears spilled over then, and Georgia could not stop them. She had not cried since leaving St. Louis, had held everything locked tight inside her, but Jackson's words broke something open. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to her, then stood patiently while she tried to compose herself. I am sorry, she managed finally, dabbing at her eyes with the cloth. I did not mean to fall apart like that. You have nothing to apologize for. His voice was infinitely gentle. Sometimes we all need to let things out. There is no shame in it. They resumed walking, and Georgia found herself telling him everything. About Robert and her cousin, about the engagement party and the humiliation, about the way everyone in her aunt's social circle had looked at her afterward with pity or contempt, about how Robert had listed all her failings for everyone to hear, making sure she understood exactly why she was not good enough for him. Jackson listened without interrupting, his jaw getting tighter and tighter as she talked. When she finally ran out of words, he said quietly, Robert Chandler is a fool and a coward. A real man does not humiliate the woman he claimed to love, and he does not blame her for his own failings, which is what he was doing, you know, blaming you for whatever is lacking in him. Georgia had never thought of it that way. What do you mean? A man who has to tear down a good woman to make himself feel bigger is not much of a man at all. He probably saw something in you that made him feel inadequate. So instead of working on himself, he decided to make you feel small instead. Jackson's voice was firm, certain. You said your cousin has money, right? A large dowry? Yes, her father is quite wealthy. There you go. He traded an honest woman for money and social position. That says everything about his character and nothing about your worth. They had reached Mrs. Morrison's boarding house, but neither of them moved toward the door. Georgia looked up at Jackson, seeing the conviction in his eyes, and felt something shift inside her. Not healing, not yet, but perhaps the first small crack in the wall she had built around her heart. Thank you, she said softly, for listening, for understanding, for not thinking I am foolish. You are not foolish, you are brave. It takes courage to leave everything you know and start over. He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him even more handsome. And for what it is worth, I think Amarillo is a much better place with you in it. That night, Georgia lay in bed and pressed Jackson's handkerchief to her face. He had told her to keep it, promising he had others. It smelled faintly of soap and leather and something uniquely him. She thought about his words, about the way he had looked at her like she mattered, like she was worth something. Maybe, just maybe, she could allow herself to hope again. Over the following weeks, Jackson made it a point to talk to Georgia every evening after supper. At first it was just small conversation, asking about her day or commenting on the meal. But gradually, as she relaxed around him, their conversations grew longer and more personal. He told her about growing up in Kansas, about his father's small ranch, and how it had been lost when his father died, and his mother could not keep up the mortgage payments, about how he had been working ranches since he was 14, learning everything he could and saving every penny toward buying his own land someday. "I have got almost enough for a down payment," he told her one evening in mid-October. They were sitting on the front porch of the boarding house, enjoying the cool evening air. "Mrs.?" Morrison had shooed them out of the kitchen after Georgia had helped clean up, telling them young people needed to relax sometimes. "There is a piece of land about 10 miles north of here, near Palo Duro Canyon. The owner is getting too old to work it and wants to sell. It is not much, only about 200 acres, but it has good water and decent grazing. I could start small, build it up over time." "That sounds wonderful, Jackson. How soon do you think you could buy it?" Georgia was working on mending a shirt, her needle flashing in the lamplight from the window. "Maybe by spring if I can save enough over the winter. The Rocking M is talking about bringing in some horses that will need breaking, and they will pay extra for that work. It is hard and dangerous, but the money is good." He paused, then added, "I want to have something of my own, you know, something I built with my own hands that no one can take away." "I understand that feeling." George's voice was quiet. "I think everyone wants to belong somewhere, to have a place that is truly theirs." Jackson looked at her intently. "You belong here, Georgia, in Amarillo, at Mrs. Morrison's. You have made yourself a place here." "I suppose so." She kept her eyes on her mending, not wanting him to see how much his words affected her. "Though it is not the same as having something that is truly my own. What would you want if you could have anything?" His question was curious, genuine. Georgia thought about it, her needle stilling. "I think I would want a home. Not a boarding house or a rented room, but a real home, with a garden where I could grow vegetables and flowers, a kitchen with a good stove, maybe chickens for eggs. Nothing fancy, just something solid and real and mine." She laughed a little, embarrassed. "That probably sounds silly." "It does not sound silly at all. It sounds perfect." There was something in his voice that made her look up, and when their eyes met, she saw warmth there that made her breath catch. "You deserve that, Georgia. You deserve a home and happiness and a man who sees how special you are." Before she could respond, the door opened and Mr. Peterson came out, grumbling about the heat in his room. The moment was broken, but Georgia felt it lingering between them, a new awareness that was both thrilling and terrifying. A few days later, Mrs. Morrison asked Georgia to take a basket of mending to Mr. Chin's laundry. "My arthritis is particularly bad today, and that basket is too heavy for me. Would you mind, dear?" Georgia agreed readily and set off down Main Street with the basket on her arm. Mr. Chen's establishment was near the edge of town, and she enjoyed the walk in the crisp autumn air. The trees that lined the residential streets were turning gold and orange, reminding her of the autumns of her childhood in Missouri. She was so lost in thought that she did not notice the man following her until she turned onto the less populated side street where Mr. Chen's laundry was located. The footsteps behind her were too close, too deliberate. Her heart began to race as she quickened her pace, but the footsteps matched hers. "Georgia Harper." The voice was slurred, and when she glanced back, she saw one of the cowboys from that first Sunday, the tall one who had grabbed her arm. He was clearly drunk, weaving slightly as he walked. "I have been wanting to talk to you. I have nothing to say to you. Please leave me alone." She clutched the basket tighter and walked faster, but he was gaining on her. "That cowboy of yours is not here to protect you now. Thought maybe we could have that friendly drink I offered." George's mind raced. Mr. Chen's laundry was still 2 buildings away, and the street was empty. She could scream, but she did not know if anyone would hear her. She was trying to decide what to do when a figure stepped out of the narrow alley beside her. "I think the lady made herself clear." Jackson's voice was cold as winter ice. He must have seen her leave and followed to make sure she was safe. "You need to move along." The drunk cowboy stopped, swaying. "You again, always sticking your nose where it does not belong. And you always bothering ladies who want nothing to do with you. Seems like you did not learn your lesson last time." Jackson moved to stand between Georgia and the drunk, his body a protective barrier. "I am only going to say this once more. Leave. Now." The cowboy took a step forward, his hand moving toward his gun, but he was too drunk and too slow. Jackson moved faster than Georgia would have thought possible, knocking the man's hand away and grabbing his wrist in one smooth motion. There was a brief struggle, and then the drunk cowboy was on the ground, groaning. "Next time I see you even look at Miss Harper, we are going to have a much more serious conversation," Jackson said, his voice deadly calm. "Are we clear?" The man nodded, scrambling to his feet and stumbling away down the street. Jackson watched him go, then turned to Georgia, his expression immediately softening with concern. "Are you hurt? Did he touch you?" "No, I am fine. He just frightened me." Her hands were shaking so badly the basket rattled, and Jackson gently took it from her. "Come on, let me walk you to Mr. Chen's, and then I will take you home." At the laundry, Jackson explained what had happened to Mr. Chen, who immediately offered Georgia a cup of tea to settle her nerves. She drank it gratefully while Jackson and Mr. Chen talked in low voices by the door. She heard Mr. Chen say he would spread word about the cowboy, that the man would find himself unwelcome in most establishments in town after this. On the walk back to the boarding house, Jackson was quiet, his jaw tight. Georgia finally said, "You seem angry." "I am, not at you," he added quickly. "At that fool, and at myself for not doing more the first time. Men like that do not change. They just keep pushing until someone pushes back harder. You probably should not have followed me. What if he had shot you?" The thought made her feel sick. Jackson stopped walking and turned to face her, his eyes intense. "Georgia, I would face down 10 armed men before I would let anyone hurt you. Do you understand that?" Her breath caught at the fierce protectiveness in his voice. "Why? Why do you care so much?" "Because you matter. Because in the past 2 months, you have become important to me." He reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and gentle. "Because when I think about my future, about that ranch I want to buy, about the home I want to build, I find myself imagining you there. And if that is too forward, if I am speaking out of turn, then I apologize. But after today, I cannot keep pretending I do not have feelings for you." George's heart was pounding so hard, she thought he must be able to hear it. "Jackson, I cannot. I am not the right woman for you. I am not enough. Robert made that very clear." Robert was wrong. Jackson's voice was fierce now. He cupped her face in his hands, making her look at him. "He was wrong, Georgia. You are not enough. You are more than enough for any man worth breathing. You are kind and hard-working and brave. You are smart and funny when you let yourself be. You are beautiful, even though you do not seem to see it. And any man who could not recognize what he had in you is a fool who does not deserve you." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she did not care. "You really believe that?" "I know it. As sure as I know the sun will rise tomorrow, I know you are worth everything good in this world." His thumbs gently wiped away her tears. "I am not asking you to marry me right this minute. I know you need time to heal, to learn to trust again. But I am asking you to give me a chance. Let me show you how a man should treat the woman he cares about. Let me prove to you that you are everything I could ever want." "I am scared," she whispered. "What if I am not enough for you either? What if you realize Robert was right? That is never going to happen, but I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving it to you if that is what it takes." He smiled, that warm smile that made her heart flutter. "What do you say, Georgia? Will you give me a chance? Give us a chance?" She looked into his blue-gray eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and hope and something that looked an awful lot like love. And for the first time since that terrible night in St. Louis, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be enough. That maybe she was worth loving after all. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, I will give us a chance." Jackson's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Georgia let herself lean into his strength. For the first time in months, she felt safe. She felt valued. She felt like maybe she could be whole again. That evening at supper, Mrs. Morrison took one look at them and smiled knowingly. Over the following weeks, as autumn deepened into early winter, Jackson courted Georgia with a quiet determination that made her heart sing. He brought her wildflowers he found on the range, their petals bright against the brown grass. He helped her hang laundry when he came home early, not caring that the other boarders teased him about it. He sat with her on the porch every evening, talking about everything and nothing, sharing dreams and memories and hopes. He took her to church on Sundays, walking proudly beside her down Main Street. He introduced her to people around town, his hand at her elbow, making sure everyone knew she was special to him. When the owner of the dress shop needed temporary help because her assistant was sick, Jackson was the one who suggested Georgia, knowing she could use the extra money. When Georgia mentioned missing the library in St. Louis, Jackson pooled money with the other boarders and bought her 3 books for her birthday in November, wrapped carefully in brown paper. "How did you even know it was my birthday?" she asked, delighted and touched by the gift. "I asked Mrs. Morrison," he admitted, looking pleased with himself. "I wanted to do something special for you." Georgia threw her arms around his neck, not caring that they were on the front porch where anyone could see. "Thank you. This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me." "You deserve thoughtful gifts. You deserve everything good." He kissed her forehead, a chaste kiss that still made her blush. It was the first of many kisses. Their first real kiss happened on a cold December evening when they were walking back from the church Christmas social. Snow was falling, rare for Amarillo, but magical when it happened. Georgia tilted her face up to catch snowflakes on her tongue, laughing, and when she looked back at Jackson, he was watching her with such tenderness it made her breath catch. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You are so beautiful when you laugh. I wish you would do it more often." He reached out and brushed a snowflake from her cheek. "Georgia, I know I said I would not rush you, but I have to tell you. I love you. I have loved you since that first Sunday when you looked ready to stab those cowboys with your hat pin. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you hum when you are cooking. I love everything about you. Jackson," his name was a whisper on her lips, "I love you too. I think I have for weeks now, but I was too scared to admit it. Do not be scared. Not with me. Never with me." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch warm despite the cold. "Can I kiss you?" She nodded, and he lowered his head, pressing his lips to hers gently, reverently, like she was something precious. The kiss was soft and sweet and perfect, and when they finally pulled apart, Georgia was breathless. "I have been wanting to do that for so long," Jackson murmured, resting his forehead against hers. "Then you should probably do it again," Georgia said, surprising herself with her boldness. He laughed and obliged, kissing her again, as snow fell around them and the world narrowed to just the two of them. Christmas that year was the happiest Georgia could remember in a long time. Mrs. Morrison insisted on a proper Christmas dinner with all the boarders, and Georgia helped her prepare a feast of roast goose, mashed potatoes, stuffing, cranberry sauce, and 3 kinds of pie. Jackson gave her a beautiful shawl he had bought from a trader who came through town, the wool soft and dyed a deep blue that matched her best dress. "I saw it and thought of you," he said as she wrapped it around her shoulders. "The blue matches your eyes when you are happy." Georgia had knitted him a scarf, working on it secretly late at night by lamplight. "For those cold mornings riding out to the ranch," she said as he wound it around his neck. "It is perfect. I will think of you every time I wear it." He kissed her there in the parlor, not caring that Mrs. Morrison and the other boarders were watching with approving smiles. On New Year's Eve, Jackson took Georgia for a walk, despite the cold. They ended up at the edge of town, looking out over the dark prairie that stretched endlessly under the stars. Jackson had his arm around her, keeping her warm, and Georgia leaned into him contentedly. "I talked to the man about the land today," Jackson said quietly. "He has agreed to sell it to me. I can sign the papers next week." Georgia straightened, looking up at him with excitement. "Jackson, that is wonderful. You are going to have your ranch?" "Our ranch," he corrected, turning to face her. He took both her hands in his. "Georgia, I know we have only been courting for a few months, but I am sure about this. I am sure about you, about us. I want to build that ranch with you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you in my arms every night. I want to grow old with you and watch our children play in the yard of the home we build together." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. When he opened it, Georgia saw a simple gold band with a small diamond that sparkled in the starlight. "It is not much," Jackson said, and for the first time, she heard uncertainty in his voice. "But it was my grandmother's, and my mother gave it to me before she died. She told me to give it to the woman I could not live without. Georgia Harper, will you marry me? Will you take a chance on a cowboy with big dreams and an even bigger love for you?" Georgia's vision blurred with tears, but they were happy tears this time. She thought about Robert and his cruelty, about how he had made her feel worthless and small. And then she thought about Jackson, who saw her worth when she could not see it herself. who made her laugh and feel safe and beautiful, who loved her not, despite her perceived flaws, but because of who she truly was. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, Jackson, I will marry you. I will build a life with you and grow old with you and love you for all my days." He slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and Georgia kissed him back with all the love and hope and joy that filled her heart. They were married in February of 1883, in the small church in Amarillo, with Mrs. Morrison and all the boarders in attendance. Georgia wore a new dress that Mrs. Morrison had helped her make, a beautiful cream-colored silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Jackson wore his best suit and looked so handsome it made her heart race. When the preacher asked if he took Georgia to be his lawfully wedded wife, Jackson's "I do" rang out clear and strong, and when it was her turn, Georgia's "I do" was just as firm. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said with a smile. "You may kiss your bride." Jackson cupped Georgia's face in his hands, his eyes shining with love and happiness. "Hello, Mrs. Brennan," he murmured. "Hello, husband," she whispered back, and then he was kissing her, and everyone was cheering. They spent their wedding night in a hotel in Amarillo, a luxury Jackson insisted on. Georgia was nervous, having never been with a man before, but Jackson was patient and gentle, taking his time to make sure she was comfortable and ready. When they finally came together as man and wife, it was beautiful and right, and afterward, Georgia lay in his arms feeling cherished and loved and complete. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself." "I love you too," Jackson replied, his arms tightening around her. "And I am going to spend every day making sure you know how precious you are to me." They moved to the ranch the following week. The land was everything Jackson had promised, with rolling prairie grass and a creek that ran year-round. There was a small cabin on the property, just 2 rooms, but it was sturdy and had good bones. Jackson had already started making improvements, adding a better stove and fixing the roof. "It is not much yet," he said as he carried her over the threshold, "but we will build it up together." Georgia looked around the simple cabin and felt tears of joy prick her eyes. It was not fancy or elegant. There were no fine furnishings or expensive decorations, but it was theirs, built with honest work and filled with love. It was home. "It is perfect," she said, and meant it. Life on the ranch was hard work, but Georgia had never been happier. She planted a garden as soon as the weather warmed, putting in vegetables and herbs and the flower seeds Mrs. Morrison had given her as a wedding gift. Jackson worked from sunup to sundown, building fences and breaking horses and slowly expanding their small herd of cattle. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set over the prairie, and talk about their dreams for the future. "I want to add another room," Jackson said one evening in May. "A proper bedroom, so we can turn the main room into a parlor and kitchen area, and eventually, we will need rooms for children." "Children," Georgia repeated softly, her hand going to her stomach. She had suspected for a few weeks now, but had not been certain until the doctor in town confirmed it yesterday. "Jackson, about that." He turned to look at her, and something in her expression made his eyes widen. "Georgia, are you saying what I think you are saying?" She nodded, unable to keep the smile from her face. "We are going to have a baby, in December, the doctor thinks." Jackson let out a whoop of joy and scooped her up, spinning her around before setting her down carefully, as if she was made of glass. "We are going to have a baby. Georgia, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am overjoyed. I am blessed beyond measure." He kissed her tenderly. "You are giving me everything I ever wanted. A home, a family, a life worth living. How did I get so lucky?" "I am the lucky one," Georgia said, thinking about how far she had come from that day she had arrived in Amarillo, broken and certain she was not enough. "You saved me, Jackson. You made me whole again." "We saved each other," he corrected. "And we are going to build something beautiful together, you and me and this baby, a life filled with love and laughter and all the things that really matter." True to his word, Jackson added a bedroom to the cabin before summer's end, working late into the evenings to get it finished. Mrs. Morrison came out to visit and brought baby clothes she had been making, along with advice and encouragement. The other former boarders visited too, bringing gifts and congratulations. Georgia spent her days tending the garden, which had flourished beyond her expectations, and fixing up the cabin to make it more of a home. She sewed curtains for the windows and a quilt for their bed. She learned to make cheese and butter from the cow Jackson had bought. She preserved vegetables from the garden, lining the shelves with jars of pickles and tomatoes and beans. Every evening, she would prepare supper and wait for Jackson to come home. And when he did, he would kiss her and put his hand on her growing belly and tell her how much he loved them both. In early December, on a cold night when snow was falling softly outside, Georgia went into labor. Jackson rode into town to fetch the doctor and Mrs. Morrison, then paced the cabin floor anxiously while they tended to Georgia. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Jackson feared he might lose her. But Georgia was strong, stronger than she had ever given herself credit for. And just before dawn, on December 12th, 1883, she brought their son into the world. "A boy," the doctor said, handing the squalling infant to Jackson. "You have a fine, healthy son." Jackson looked down at the tiny red-faced baby in his arms and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Let me see him," Georgia said weakly from the bed, and Jackson carefully placed their son in her arms. She looked down at the baby, with tears streaming down her face, all the pain and exhaustion forgotten in the overwhelming rush of love she felt for this tiny person she had created. "Hello, little one," she murmured. "I am your mama, and that is your papa, and we love you so very much." "What should we name him?" Jackson asked, sitting on the edge of the bed beside them. Georgia thought for a moment, looking at her husband and remembering everything they had been through to get to this moment. "What was your father's name?" "John William Brennan." "Then let us call him William John Brennan, Billy for short." She looked down at the baby. "Does that sound good to you, sweet Billy?" The baby made a small sound, and Jackson laughed. "I think he approves." Mrs. Morrison and the doctor left them alone once they were sure both mother and baby were doing well. Jackson lay beside Georgia on the bed, careful not to jostle her, and they both watched their son sleep. "I never thought I could be this happy," Georgia said softly. "There were times in St. Louis when I thought my life was over, that I would never have anything good again. And now, look at us. We have a home and a ranch and this beautiful baby. We have everything." "We have each other," Jackson said. "That is all we have ever needed. Everything else is just blessing on top of blessing." He kissed her forehead. "You did so well today. You were so strong and brave. I am in awe of you." "I had motivation," Georgia said, smiling at their sleeping son. "I had everything to fight for. Billy was a good baby, sleeping in long stretches and only fussing when he was hungry or needed changing." Georgia took to motherhood naturally, though she worried constantly that she was not doing things right. Jackson was a devoted father, getting up with her in the night to help with feedings and rocking Billy when he was fussy. He would talk to his son about the ranch and the horses and the plans he had for their future, and Georgia would watch them with a full heart. The winter was hard, with several snowstorms that left them snowed in for days at a time. But Georgia did not mind. She was content to stay in their warm cabin with her husband and son, watching the snow fall outside while they were safe and cozy inside. Jackson used the time to make repairs and improvements to the cabin and to carve wooden toys for Billy to play with when he was older. Spring came, and with it renewed work on the ranch. Jackson hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work now that the herd was growing. Georgia planted an even bigger garden, with Billy napping in a basket in the shade while she worked. She started raising chickens for eggs and meat, just like she had dreamed of that night on Mrs. Morrison's porch when Jackson had first asked her what she wanted. On their first anniversary, Jackson gave her a beautiful rocking chair he had made himself, carving intricate designs into the wood. "For you to rock our babies in," he said, and Georgia noticed the plural. "Are you hoping for more children already?" she teased. "I am hoping for as many as you want to give me," he said seriously. "Our home is full of love. There is plenty of room for more little ones to share in that." In the summer of 1884, Georgia discovered she was expecting again. This time, she was less nervous, more confident in her body's ability to do what needed to be done. Jackson was just as excited as he had been the first time, maybe more so since he knew what to expect now. Their daughter was born in March of 1885, arriving quickly and with less difficulty than Billy's birth had been. They named her Rose, after the wildflowers that grew on the prairie in summer. She had George's dark hair and Jackson's blue-gray eyes, and Billy was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered, and Jackson was able to hire more help and buy more land. They added on to the cabin again, creating a proper parlor and kitchen and 2 more bedrooms. Georgia's garden became famous in the area, and she started selling her excess produce and preserves in town. Mrs. Morrison came to visit often, delighting in the grandchildren she had never had. In 1887, they had another son, whom they named Thomas, and in 1889, another daughter they called Grace. Their home was full of laughter and noise and love, exactly as they had dreamed. Jackson taught Billy and Thomas to ride and rope and care for the horses. Georgia taught Rose and Grace to garden and cook and sew. But more importantly, they taught all their children about love and respect and the value of hard work and family. On their 10th anniversary, Jackson and Georgia took a rare evening away from the children, leaving them with Mrs. Morrison, and rode out to a hill overlooking their ranch. The land had grown to over 800 acres now, with a good-sized herd and a reputation for quality horses. The cabin had become a proper ranch house with 6 bedrooms, a big kitchen, and a parlor with real furniture and windows. "Look at what we built," Jackson said, his arm around Georgia as they surveyed their domain. "From nothing to all this." "We did it together," Georgia said. She was 30 now, with some gray in her hair and lines at her eyes from squinting in the Texas sun, but she had never been happier or more content. "I cannot imagine my life any other way now. Cannot imagine being anywhere but here, with you." "Do you ever think about St. Louis, about Robert and what might have been?" Jackson asked. Georgia considered the question seriously. "Sometimes, but not with regret. More with gratitude, I think. If Robert had not been who he was, if he had married me like he promised, I would have spent my life with a man who did not value me. I would never have come to Amarillo. I would never have met you or had our children. I would have missed out on all of this." She gestured at the ranch spread out before them. "So, in a strange way, I am grateful to him for showing me his true colors. He set me free to find real love." "Do you still think you are not enough?" Jackson asked, turning her to face him. "Do you still hear his voice in your head telling you that you are lacking?" Georgia smiled and shook her head. "No, I have not thought that in years. How could I, when I am surrounded by so much proof that I am more than enough? You show me every day with the way you love me. Our children show me with their smiles and hugs. This ranch shows me, because we built it together with our own hands and hearts. I am enough, Jackson. I am finally enough." "You were always enough," Jackson said, pulling her close. "You just needed the right man to see it, and I thank God every day that I was lucky enough to be that man." He kissed her as the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, and Georgia kissed him back, pouring all her love and gratitude and joy into that kiss, thinking about the broken woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Amarillo 8 years ago. That woman had been so certain she was not good enough, that she would never be loved or valued, but she had been wrong. She had been worthy all along. She had just needed to find the right place, the right person, to show her the truth. As they rode back to the ranch house as stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Georgia thought about the future. There would be challenges ahead, she knew. Ranching was never easy, and raising children was hard work, but they would face it together as they had faced everything else, and that was more than enough. The years passed in a blur of hard work and joy. Billy grew into a tall young man who loved working the ranch alongside his father. Thomas was more interested in books and numbers, and Jackson encouraged him to get an education, thinking he might be the one to handle the business side of the ranch someday. Rose became an excellent horsewoman, able to ride as well as any of the ranch hands. Grace showed a talent for healing, and often helped tend to sick animals or injured workers. In 1895, Georgia and Jackson celebrated their 13th anniversary. They were sitting on the porch of their ranch house, watching their children play in the yard. Billy was 18 now, and courting a nice girl from town. Rose was 12, Thomas 10, and Grace 6. They had grown faster than Georgia could have imagined. "We should have more," Jackson said suddenly. Georgia laughed. "More children? Jackson Brennan, I am 35 years old. Are you not content with the 4 we have?" "I am content with everything we have, but I love our family. I love watching them grow and learn and become their own people. And I love you." If you wanted to have more babies, I would be thrilled. He took her hand, bringing it to his lips. But if you are done, I understand. You have given me more than I ever dreamed of having. Georgia thought about it, about the joy her children brought her and the love she had for each of them. Let us see what God has planned for us. If He blesses us with more, then we will be grateful. If He does not, then we will be grateful for what we have. As it turned out, God had one more blessing in store for them. In early 1896, Georgia discovered she was expecting again. Much to her surprise, their last baby, another boy they named Daniel, was born in September of that year. He was healthy and happy, and his older siblings doted on him constantly. "Our last little one," Georgia said, holding baby Daniel while Jackson sat beside her. "It feels right somehow, like our family is complete now." "It is perfect," Jackson agreed. 5 children, a thriving ranch, and the love of my life by my side. What more could any man ask for? Billy married his sweetheart Margaret in 1897, and they built a house on the western edge of the ranch property. Jackson signed over 50 acres to them as a wedding gift, helping Billy start his own small operation while still being part of the family ranch. When Billy and Margaret's first child was born in 1898, making Georgia and Jackson grandparents at 40 and 38 respectively, Georgia cried happy tears as she held the tiny girl. "Grandma Georgia," she said, testing out the title. "I like the sound of that." "You are too young to be a grandmother," Jackson teased. "Nonsense. I am exactly the right age." She looked up at him with love in her eyes. "Just like I was exactly the right age when I met you, and exactly the right age when we got married, and exactly the right age for everything we have done together. Our timing has always been perfect, Jackson. It was all meant to be." Life continued its steady rhythm. The ranch prospered beyond their wildest dreams. Thomas went to college in Dallas, studying business and accounting, but came home every summer and eventually full-time after graduation, helping manage the financial side of the growing operation. Rose surprised everyone by falling in love with one of the ranch hands, a good man named Samuel who treated her like a queen. Jackson gave them his blessing and 40 acres of land for a wedding gift, just as he had with Billy. Grace, true to her calling, went to nursing school and came back to Amarillo to work at the town's small hospital. She married a doctor she met there, and they built a practice together in town. Daniel, the baby of the family, showed signs of following in Billy's footsteps, loving the ranch work and the animals. In 1910, on a warm spring evening, Georgia and Jackson celebrated their 27th anniversary. They were in their 50s now, with gray hair and weathered faces, but still deeply in love. They had 14 grandchildren at last count, with more on the way. The ranch had grown to over 2,000 acres and employed 15 people year-round. They walked hand in hand through the land they had built together, past the big ranch house that had replaced the small cabin, past the barns and corrals, past the fields where cattle grazed peacefully. They walked to the hill where they had stood on their 10th anniversary, looking out over everything they had created. "Do you remember the night I proposed?" Jackson asked, his arm around her waist. "Standing not far from here, looking at the stars? I remember everything about that night, how scared I was, how hopeful, how you told me I was more than enough for any man worth breathing." Georgia leaned her head on his shoulder. "You changed my life, Jackson. You saved me from a darkness I did not know how to escape." "You saved yourself," Jackson corrected gently. "You had the courage to leave St. Louis, to start over, to take a chance on a cowboy with nothing but dreams and determination. I just loved you. That was the easy part. It has been a good life, has it not?" Georgia looked out over the land as the sun began to set. "Better than anything I could have imagined when I was that frightened girl on the stagecoach." "It has been the best life," Jackson agreed. "And it is not over yet. We have many more years ahead of us, God willing, many more sunsets to watch together, many more grandchildren to spoil, many more memories to make." Georgia turned in his arms and looked up at him, seeing the boy he had been and the man he had become, seeing all the years of love and partnership and joy etched in the lines of his face. "I love you, Jackson Brennan. I have loved you for 27 years, and I will love you for however many more we are given. I love you too, Georgia Brennan, my wife, my partner, my heart." He kissed her softly, tenderly, the way he had kissed her that snowy night so many years ago. You are more than enough. You have always been more than enough. You are everything. As the sun set over the Texas prairie, painting the sky in brilliant colors, they stood together on the hill overlooking the life they had built. From nothing they had created something beautiful and lasting. From pain and heartbreak had come joy and love beyond measure. And Georgia, who had once believed she was not enough, knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly who she was meant to be, exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the man she was meant to love. The years continued to roll by like the seasons, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. The ranch adapted to changing times, bringing in new breeding stock and modern equipment, while still maintaining the traditional values that Jackson and Georgia had built their lives on. Their children grew into strong, capable adults who honored their parents by building good lives of their own. In 1920, Jackson and Georgia celebrated their 37th anniversary and Georgia's 60th birthday. The whole family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. All 5 of their children were there, with their spouses and children. 23 grandchildren ran around the property, ranging from Billy's 22-year-old son down to Grace's newest baby. It was chaos and noise and laughter, and Georgia had never been happier. Jackson stood at the head of the long table they had set up outside, raising his glass for a toast. His hair was white now, and his face was deeply lined from decades in the sun, but his eyes were still that striking blue-gray, and they still looked at Georgia with the same love they had held that first Sunday evening so many years ago. 37 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I have ever known, he said, his voice still strong despite his age. She was broken when I met her, though she tried hard not to show it. Someone had told her she was not enough, and she had believed him. But I saw the truth. I saw her strength and her kindness and her beautiful heart. And I spent every day since then trying to show her what I saw. He turned to look directly at Georgia, and she felt tears prick her eyes at the love in his gaze. Georgia, you have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. You have given me 5 incredible children and more grandchildren than I can count without losing track. You have worked beside me through drought and hard winters, through sick animals and difficult times. And you never complained. You built this ranch as much as I did. You made our house a home. You made me a better man than I ever could have been without you. And I want everyone here to know that I have been blessed beyond measure to call you my wife. Everyone applauded, and Georgia stood and went to him, not caring that she was crying. Jackson pulled her into his arms, and she could feel that he was crying too. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life." "Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy," he whispered back. "Best decision you ever made, I hope." "The very best," she agreed. That night, after everyone had gone to bed and the house was finally quiet, Georgia and Jackson sat together on the porch swing Jackson had built years ago. The night was warm and clear, with stars spread across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "I have been thinking," Jackson said slowly, "about what comes next." Georgia felt a chill despite the warm night. They were both getting older, and the reality of mortality was something they could no longer ignore. "What do you mean?" "I mean the ranch, our legacy. I want to make sure everything is set up properly so the children never have to fight over it or worry about what we wanted." He took her hand. "I have been talking to Thomas about drawing up papers that divide the land fairly between all 5 of them. They can choose to work it together or each take their portion, but it will be theirs free and clear, our life's work, passed on to them." Georgia nodded. "That sounds wise. They are all responsible people. They will honor what we built. And I want to make sure you are taken care of, no matter what. If something happens to me, I want you to have everything you need: a home, income, security. You should never have to worry or depend on anyone." Jackson's voice was fierce. "You are my wife, my partner. You have earned every bit of this ranch as much as I have. Jackson, nothing is going to happen to you. We have many more years together." But even as she said it, Georgia knew they could not count on that. They had been blessed with good health and long lives, but they were both in their 60s now. The future was uncertain. "I hope so. God, I hope so. But we need to be realistic." He pulled her closer. "Promise me something. If I go first, you will not give up. You will keep living, keep enjoying life. spend time with the grandchildren, tend your garden, visit with Mrs. Morrison. Mrs. Morrison is 86 years old, Jackson. I do not know how much longer she will be with us either. But Georgia understood what he was asking. I promise. If you go first, I will keep living. But you have to promise me the same thing. I do not think I could go on without you, Jackson said honestly. You would have to, for the children and grandchildren. They need us both. Georgia turned his face toward hers. Promise me, Jackson. Promise you will keep living no matter what. I promise, he said finally. Then he kissed her, and they sat together under the stars, holding each other close and grateful for every moment they had been given. As it turned out, they had many more years together. Through the 1920s and into the early 1930s, they watched their family continue to grow and thrive. More great-grandchildren arrived, and the ranch continued to prosper, even through difficult economic times. Jackson finally retired from active ranch work in 1932, turning over daily operations to Billy and Daniel, though he still offered advice and enjoyed riding around the property on his old horse. Georgia continued her garden, though on a smaller scale, and spent her days cooking for family gatherings, sewing quilts for new babies, and writing letters to far-flung grandchildren who had moved to cities for work or school. She and Mrs. Morrison, who was now over 100 years old and still sharp as a tack, visited every week, drinking tea and remembering the old days. In the spring of 1935, Jackson fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, and despite Grace's best efforts and the doctors in Amarillo doing everything they could, it became clear that his lungs were failing. He was 75 years old and had lived a full, hard life. His body was simply wearing out. Georgia refused to leave his side. She sat by his bed in their room, holding his hand and talking to him about all their memories. The children and grandchildren came to visit, saying their goodbyes, and Jackson smiled at each of them, telling them how proud he was, how much he loved them. On a warm May evening, as the sun was setting and painting the sky the colors of a Texas sunset, Jackson squeezed Georgia's hand weakly. "Come here," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Georgia leaned close, her tears falling on his face. "I am here, my love. I am right here." "Best life I could have asked for," he said, his eyes finding hers. "All because of you. You were more than enough, Georgia. You were everything." "You were everything to me, too," she whispered. "I love you so much. Thank you for showing me I was worthy of love. Thank you for our life together. Not goodbye," he said, smiling faintly. "Just until later. Wait for me, when your time comes. I will be there. I will wait as long as it takes," Georgia promised, "and then we will be together again." Jackson took one more breath, squeezed her hand one final time, and then he was gone. Georgia sat with him as the sun set completely and stars began to appear in the darkening sky, holding the hand of the man who had been her partner, her love, her everything for 52 years. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people. Jackson had been respected and loved throughout the county, known for his fairness, his hard work, and his devotion to his family. Georgia stood surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, accepting condolences from neighbors and friends, holding herself together with the strength that Jackson had always seen in her. In the months that followed, Georgia grieved deeply but found comfort in her family and in the life she and Jackson had built together. She spent time with each of her children, listening to their favorite memories of their father. She held her grandchildren and told them stories about the man their grandfather had been. She tended her garden and watched the sunsets and felt Jackson's presence all around her. True to her promise, she kept living. She attended church every Sunday. She hosted family dinners. She watched her family grow and thrive. And every evening, she would sit on the porch swing and talk to Jackson as if he were still there beside her, telling him about her day and how much she missed him. "You were right, you know," she said one evening, 2 years after his death. She was 77 now, her body slowing down, but her mind still sharp. "About everything. About me being enough. About us building something beautiful together. About love being the most important thing. You were right about all of it, and I am so grateful I listened to you that day on the street when you offered to walk me home." Georgia lived for 3 more years, surrounded by love and family. She got to meet several more great-grandchildren, and even one great-great-grandchild. She saw Billy's grandson take over as the primary manager of the ranch, continuing the legacy she and Jackson had started. She saw Rose's daughter become a teacher, Grace's son become a veterinarian, Thomas's daughter become a lawyer. The Brennan family had grown and spread, but they all remembered their roots, remembered the love story that had started everything. On a cool October evening in 1938, Georgia passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family. She was 80 years old and had lived a full, rich life beyond anything she had imagined possible when she had stepped off that stagecoach in Amarillo 56 years earlier. They buried her beside Jackson on the hill overlooking the ranch, the place where he had proposed and where they had stood together so many times over the years. Her gravestone read, "Georgia Harper Brennan, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she was more than enough." And if you had asked anyone who knew her, they would have told you it was absolutely true. The frightened, broken woman who had believed she was not enough had become the foundation of a family dynasty. A woman of strength and grace who had loved deeply and been deeply loved in return. She had taken a chance on a cowboy with dreams and an open heart, and together they had built something that would last for generations. The Brennan Ranch continued to thrive, passed down through the family, each generation adding their own touches while honoring the legacy of Jackson and Georgia. And every time the family gathered, someone would tell the story of how it all started. About a woman who thought she was not enough, and a cowboy who saw her true worth. About a love that healed old wounds and built something beautiful. About two people who found each other in a small Texas town and created a life that proved, beyond any doubt, that love and faith and hard work could overcome anything. And somewhere beyond the stars, in whatever comes after, Jackson and Georgia were together again, watching over the family they had created, satisfied with the legacy they had left behind, and grateful for every moment of the beautiful life they had shared.